Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to the ninth Levitum Knot. Last week we had some technical issues where ACT broadband went down and three people who were on the call all got disconnected, including the presenter Vishnu. So we're having a little redux of last week's call on photography and post-processing. So I'll let Vishnu take it away and hopefully ACT plays well.
Hey all, like Avi said, today I'm here to talk about post-processing in photography. In the last session, I had covered off how to do basic photography composition and overall how a DSLR works. So this would be a follow-up session wherein once you've clicked an image, what kind of edits or corrections you can do to enhance your image appeal. So I'll go ahead and share my slide. A second. Okay. Can you guys see my slide?
Yep, I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically today I'm going to talk about some techniques that are used in photo editing. These are very basic. We'll just try to cover the science behind all these. So the first one is cropping. So in cropping, basically we remove the outer parts of an image. So once you click an image, sometimes you have a larger field of view. You may not have had the time to focus, basically frame an image in such a way where you are able to accentuate a subject matter. So, or else you would have clicked an image and then you think a better aspect ratio of the subject would give more meaning to the image. Mainly it is used, mainly it is used to remove certain unwanted elements in the screen towards the edges. That once when we are clicking, we will not be able to view through the viewfinder, or we will not have the time to read through. As an example, I've added an image here where you see obviously the idea was to click a bunch of flowers here, but you can see there's some kind of graphics that is clicked in, and there are some flowers which are towards the right side of the image which kind of look unwanted in the paint. So if you had to go ahead and crop these out, you would get an image which will have the main subject in view, and it kind of accentuates the main subject. Similarly, another example is we have a flower here again, which where the idea was to click the flower itself, but then you can see a lot of green is crept in, as well as towards the top right side of the image, there is a lot of stuff that you don't want. So go ahead and crop this image. This particular image has been cropped from all sides to kind of get more perfect to the flower here. The next one is straightening. So in straightening, sometimes when we click an image, we find that the visual elements of the image are not aligned properly with the outer edges of the image. So sometimes when you click a picture, the buildings, the subject may look, the building, you have an image where you have a person and in the backdrop, and in the backdrop you have some buildings. So when you click that picture, you'll see that sometimes the person in the picture is kind of slanted, whereas the background is kind of straight. But sometimes you may not want it that way. You would want the person in the image to be straight, and the background would be not much of consequence. So we can use the technique of straightening an image to kind of fix those kind of issues. An example here is.
Hey, Vishnu, could you go full screen with the presentation? This will be a little easier.
Okay. Let me see. Let's see. Does it help? Did this change?
I think you need to share your entire screen.
Oh, okay. All right. So.
That's definitely a bit of a Google Plus gotcha, right? I mean, in Hangouts, you think your screen might be being shared. There's no indication.
When you mean the whole desktop?
Yeah, share the whole desktop and then the slides should go. Yeah, now hitting play should do it.
Morning.
Is this okay now?
Yeah, much better.
Yep,
Go for
perfect.
it.
All right. So I was talking about straightening, and the example that we're going to take a look is of this Statue of Liberty replica at Las Vegas. So if you can see in the image, what is straight here is there's a pole towards the right side of the image. That kind of is straight, but the rest of the things in the image is not straight. If you look at the bottom of the image, the road is kind of slanted. The Statue of Liberty is tilted, and the buildings also are tilted. The correction to this image would be this shot where we've kind of straightened the statue, so which essentially is the main subject of this particular image. And if you notice, the other things have kind of straightened out, but the elements which were straight, for example, the pole, that is kind of tilted now. But this doesn't affect this doesn't affect the picture much. But if you look at the overall balance, it's now well balanced. The subject at least is straight. So, and with that, the road, the bottom also became straight. So that is where you would want to straighten an image and bring balance to the image. One of the tips that to get this straight up front itself is you can use those grids that you get in the viewfinder while composing a shot. So both the first one, the cropping and straightening, could be avoided very well if you have the time to do. You have the time to compose it very well. But sometimes it's hard to do when you don't have much time. And nowadays we do have large megapixel cameras, which kind of help us to deal with both of these. Why I mean high megapixel cameras is because both these cropping and straightening always result in pixel loss. So when we cut an image, basically we are eliminating pixels out of it, which means the overall number of pixels in the image goes down. This is a problem only if we're trying to print an image on screen on the computer. It's not much of an issue, but for these kind of edits, the larger the megapixel, the better for you. Going ahead, we look at brightness and contrast, saturation and sharpness. So these have to deal with two attributes of an image. One is known as highlight, the other is shadows. So highlights and shadows are those parts of an image which are visible to the eye when you look at an image, but they're comparatively lighter or darker parts. So the highlights are the comparatively lighter parts of an image which are visible, and shadows are the comparatively darker parts of an image which are still visible. But there are certain elements in the image which which will be completely black. Basically, you can't see. For example, you have a scene where somebody is standing under an umbrella. You would see the surrounding is very bright, but there's a shadow that's cast on the face of the person, and that particular portion is still visible, but it's under it's slightly darker compared to the rest of the image. So you'll have both highlights and shadows in such an image. But at the same time, there are certain shots which you get where like you're standing in front of a cave or sorts. So on the periphery of the image, you would see there's a lot of light, and there will be some shadow areas, some highlight areas. But when you look at the cave itself, through the cave entrance, it's pretty much very dark. So that is not a shadow. It's really dark. You can't do much with it. So any sort of correction would not affect that particular area. But with controls like brightness, contrast, saturation, and sharpness, that those treatments affect highlights and shadow areas. So we'll take a look at what brightness is generally. So brightness basically simply brightens the entire image, both the shadow areas and the highlights equally. So, so here in this particular image that is shown here, we have a spoke of wheel uh, in the red, and there's a background which is much darker, maroonish kind of thing. So if you split the image in half, vertically, towards the left side is the normal image. Towards the right side is the portion where brightness has been applied. You can see both the shadow area and the highlight area both have kind of brightened up. So in terms of an image, so this is what you get as an effect of increasing brightness. Towards the left, you see the image of a child, and there's a background to it as well. So when we increase the brightness, the overall picture's brightness, including the subject as well as the background, all the highlight areas as well as the shadow areas per se. So this is what the brightness treatment lets you do. This is one of the basic treatments that is available for any photo editing software.
So Vishnu, a quick question on the brightness thing, right? So, slightly, I think, basic question, but often if you take an image which is slightly darker, you're able to brighten that and things still look okay. But if you take an image that's brighter, right?
Right.
The other way around doesn't necessarily work, right?
Right. So, so for those kind of, there are different treatments for those. So if you understand what each control lets you do, I think you'll be able to control that as well. So not necessarily, brightness is the answer to that fix. So I mean, as when we think of increasing brightness, we simply think of increasing the brightness and reducing it. So what happens is it evenly does it. So both highlight and brightness area, the highlight and shadow areas both get affected. So when you're trying to reduce the brightness, you may only want to selectively reduce the brightness in the really bright areas, but the dark areas may be okay. When you start to do that, you'll see that the darker areas become really, really dark, and then the overall image kind of loses out. Is that what you were saying, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think maybe we can look at some examples later. But
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So the next one is contrast. So it's defined as the separation between the darkest and the brightest area of an image. So in contrast, we make the shadows darker and the highlights brighter. So it increases the degree of separation with this particular control. So if you take an image example, here we see that it's a landscape shot. Towards the left part of the image is the normal shot, and towards the right is when we have applied contrast. So you can see the brighter parts are much more brighter. For example, if you look at the tree, the highlight areas, that is the tree canopy, that has some yellowish hues and it's just slightly orangish. If you look on the right side, the same thing has transformed to a much more better orange looking thing. Also, the darker parts which were still kind of blown out have gotten much more darker, which kind of defines the highlight parts more. So which gives a much more better appeal to the picture overall. So in this particular one, you may need not touch brightness at all. It's just basically the contrast control that you need to change. Similar image example. So an aerial shot. So just tweaking the contrast itself. Saturation, basically instead of increasing the separation between shadows and highlights, it increases the separation between the colors itself. It makes red more redder, green more greener, like that. Right? So if you take an example here, on the top there's a image of a landscape. You can see that the color saturation has been increased in the image overall. The blue of the sky is much more bluer, and the flowers and the greens, if you see towards the bottom part, right, and the yellows, it's kind of boosted slightly. And at the bottom there's a image which has been changed to highlight the saturations effect. So on the left is an image which has a lot of color. And on the right is once the saturation has been brought down. So no brightness, no contrast change. It's basically this color saturation that has changed.
Okay, I'm having a bit of trouble. Are we saying the image on the right is better?
No, it is just to show you what happens when you change the saturation.
Okay. Got it. So less saturation.
Yes, less saturation. So not necessarily better, but it gives you an idea of what you're controlling.
What do you know?
Okay. For example, up top, right, the image on the right does look better, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, the same way. The next one is sharpness. So this is known as edge contrast. This is along the edges. That means there are regions of an image where the highlights and shadows meet. So this would be the increase and decrease of contrast along those regions. So this is exactly what sharpness is. So if we take a look at image examples, on the top there's an image which is the leftmost image is slightly softer in appearance. If we gradually apply or increase sharpness, you can see the images become more stark and the edge contrast is increased a lot. Defining wherever the highlights and edges meet, you can see there's a clear distinction between those two regions, and it gives the image a much more rough appearance compared to the original one. So at the bottom, you can see there's a deliberately softer image that's shown, and once sharpness is applied, you get much more uh, stark appearance to those edges. So using this has to be done with a lot of caution because although on first appearance when we apply sharpness, it looks better to the eye. Thinking we get a feeling that the image has become sharp in reality. But once the fact of the matter is, once you click a picture, once you've focused on a certain element, the focus part is done. By using sharpness, you can correct minor focusing errors, but not much. Even though once you tweak the sharpness a bit, you may think that the image looks much better and all that. But once you take a print or we try to zoom into the image, we can really see what has happened. All these edge places kind of have the smudges and all these noise would have crept in. So using sharpness is good, but only to a certain extent. So while we are applying that, we should always zoom in and see how much of the real image has been affected, to what degree. So this is sharpness. So what we've seen, all the four that we've seen, is mainly to do with the highlight and the shadow regions of an image. Saturation per se is for more towards the color, but in general, those four controls are used to control the the uh, the image elements itself. The first one we saw was an error that would have crept in while using the camera itself. That means while composing a shot. The second one was once the image is taken and it's in view for the editor or the viewer, we can edit the image itself. The next two ones are basically do with the equipment again. White balance is something which causes or is a cause of the camera sensor, and the one more the other one that I'm going to show you is the vignetting. That one creeps in mainly because of the lens error. But let's take a look at white balance first. So white balance basically means once you take an image, the camera or the sensor of the camera interprets the real white into a particular shade. So no camera in the world is like as close to the human eye. So when we see in person a particular scene, we see certain whites and they appear really white to us. But when we take a picture, we often see that the whiteness of the white is kind of changed. It's either slightly bluish in color or yellowish or greenish in color. These factors, these issues usually creep in because of the the ambient light, or sometimes the the reflections and other things where these yeah. Someone want to say something? All right. The color casts generally are blue, orange, or green in color, uh, and the image example here, as we see, is the image on the left is slightly got a blue cast. So the blue cast is the most common cast that you would find generally. Uh, if you are taking a shot on a cloudy day, for say, or an overcast day, that's the cast that you would get on the image. In certain regions, particularly where it's really cold and it's on a high altitude, that's where you usually see this bluish cast, where there are overcast conditions. You'll get this orange cast when you have you have this sunset or sunrise scenarios sometimes. So the correction that is applied to this is known as a white balance. So even on the cameras, they have a lot of white balance settings that are available. So you can, with experience with the camera unit, you can try and correct those while taking the shot itself. But we do have this white balance correction capability on the photo editing software as well. So so mostly white balance correction is done during.
Yeah, Raj, you're trying to say something?
Yeah. Hey, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was saying one of the big examples of the bluish tint is underwater photos.
Okay.
So, and I mean, I think also the biggest example of ice adjusting what cameras guesstimating. So,
Yep.
you see a lot of color, but when you take the photos, they invariably come out blue. So,
Yes.
I mean, obviously we do a bunch of things to try and correct that, but the best way of correcting it is sort of adjusting the white balance, and I think the best way of doing that, like you were saying earlier, right? You kind of have pixel clarity loss, right? Whenever you do any post processing. So the best way of doing that is sort of doing a manual white balance, the white object underwater, and then at the same distance from your
Right. Right. You see what you see is white, and then you try to correct that in the camera when you see it. So.
Yeah. So that last line that you have there, the eyes adjusting but cameras guesstimating, is sort of like, it's so true that the first few times, like it was really shocking as to the difference between what we saw and what we picked.
That's an interesting one, Raj, to know. Okay. Underwater. So this is another example of the white balance correction. So the picture on top was flicked, and then you can see that it's got a bluish cast, and with the correction, we remove that cast, and the colors appear much closer. So this is what white balancing is. Okay, vignetting. Like I mentioned earlier, both white balance and vignetting are equipment-related, issues that creep in. But here, vignetting that I'm going to explain now is not as a part of an error that creeps in through the lens, but as an image editing technique. The idea, basically, vignetting is defined as the reduction of images brightness or saturation at the periphery compared to the image center. So if you take a look at an example like this, where the subjects are in the center, but the periphery is kind of darkened, has a loose loss of saturation and all those things. So the emphasis is towards the center of the image. So this particular effect used to, or not used to, it's still there in a lot of lenses when we click. So when a particular lens has a zoom limit, that's the far end and the near end zoom. Towards those ends, you can see, because of the image, because of the lens's construction itself, this kind of things creep in. towards the edges, you won't get the image which is sharp and all. And overall, once you click the picture, you get an effect which is similar to this. This particular vignetting effect while photo editing is done deliberately to emphasize the center of the image. So another example is this. So this is a shot of a hallway, and this is the shot once you take it. But once you apply vignetting to it, and what we get is an image like this. It kind of emphasizes the center of the image or the highlights of the image. The rest of the image towards the periphery is blurred out. So the effect it is like really beautiful, and I use that.
Amazing! It's amazing. Yeah.
I use that a lot. I use that.
Nice.
Yeah. Yep. So these are like the simple photo editing techniques that I use generally. I don't do much, but these are the basic things.
Awesome, Vishnu. I think sometime later, at least people like me would benefit from some Instagram and mobile photography tips.
Sure. With those, I generally go with the flow, like you mentioned, right? And you click a picture, and these are presets that are available. So you just know, and the beauty of that is you don't have to do too much. You just need to click on those, and quickly you can get a preview of all these settings that we talked about, and they're all presets. Sometimes one of them just matches, and you get the right feel of what you're looking for, and then you post it. So that's what that I've been doing mainly with mobile generally, but obviously now with Instagram adding all these other controls, it's become much more easy to do those with Instagram and other softwares.
Yeah, neat, Vishnu. Doesn't have our lot of little tidbits there.
Right, guys, that's pretty much.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Vishnu.
Thanks, Vishnu.
Stop the
It was a
broadcast.
great session.